Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. This show is a series that has been coming to you from DCTV since 2015 in a weekly program called the Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's program is pre-recorded and it's called Orfeo Negro. Thank you to DCTV and to Carmen Stanley, Program Director, to Maurice Jackson, Studio Director. And Cruchet did the audio and teleprompter, but this is our second tape. You need to look at the many years of consistent information I've placed on the internet. Use critical thinking. Work with others. There's a critical mass for the global currency reset. And I'm going to be showing you a soundtrack from a 1959 romantic comedy that was based on a Greek legend of Orpheus and Eurydice. Ready? Go. Orpheus and Eurydice get married, but later that night, Eurydice is bit by a snake and dies. So far, so terrible. Overcome with grief, Orpheus travels to the underworld to bring her back to life. He convinces Hades and Persephone to let Eurydice go, but her release comes with a catch. Eurydice must walk as they ascend to the upper world and follow Orpheus. Orpheus is consumed with passion looking at her, and it seems easy, but instead, unfortunately, Orpheus is overcome with passion just as they reach the exit. He turns to look at Eurydice, and she's immediately sent back to the underworld forever. Orpheus is devastated again, and he roams around Greece playing sad songs. Eventually, he's ripped to shreds by a group of drunken madwomen. And now I'm going to tell you about Moscow State University showing you what time and history is about. Leah Friedman has been telling us about Cherlov's article, which suggests a hypothesis, gives answer to questions. In the article, they discuss the very interesting problem dating of the famous Vesuvius eruption, which covered completely the town of Pompeii by a layer of volcanic ash and pumice stone. The author conducted extensive studies. He found and analyzed important evidence about the eruption of Vesuvius in 1631 and about the destruction by this eruption of surrounding towns. In particular, he studied carefully and analyzed the special features of the Canal of Count Sarno and its environment in Pompeii. And they followed this process and they researched the hypothesis described in the paper. And the scientist, was familiar with the efforts to gather and generalize accessible, essential information on the eruption of Vesuvius, including information from the 16th and 17th centuries. And this shows that the water conduit, the Canal of Count Sarno, and the date of Pompeii's destruction was not what the historians are telling us. And we need to look at history and discover what actual history is. That's in Moscow State University. What you learn is that your dating of history is incorrect. The eruption of Vesuvius in 1631 that covered the town of Pompeii by a layer of volcanic ash and stone, it should be verified. In accordance with this, the scientist is recommending that people interested in archaeology of Pompeii should read the article, which I've given you a link in the teleprompter. What you've seen is that your dating of history is totally incorrect. It's fabricated. And the Department of in Jordan, they're showing you that this is incorrect. And it's mostly mathematicians who are dating the, who are showing the accurate dates. When people repeat summaries of tweets, you need to see that there is a lot of shared information. If you want to think of an analogy about how things are progressing, think of starting a fire when the wood is wet. The fire is ultimately going to ignite, but the wood has to dry out. We're drying out the banking cartel timber by acting on a local level, and I'm continuing to fan the fire from the center. What's the ignition? All of us and the world's wealth. The world's wealth remains in the global debt facility. As people continue to learn about reality, the wood also dries out. Our correspondence illustrates how I'm fanning the fire from the center. And now I'm going to speak extemporaneously. I don't record these things, and I don't recall exactly what I said, but you must realize that there has probably been sabotage. Somebody didn't like what I said. And so they're making me speak extemporaneously again. What I like to do when things get erased is I like to think of something that would make the banking cartel even more angry. And so I was thinking about that, and what I decided to remind people about was that, I was imprisoned at the end of August for 3 weeks. And they probably thought that they were just going to throw away the key. But they couldn't keep me locked up, could they? No, I got out. How did I get out? Well, I'll give you a little story so that you understand how I think I got out. There were many people who were in the same situation I was, locked up. They like to lock people up. And one of these people is somebody who knew my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather was somebody who was pretty high up in the mafia. He and his brothers leased a garage in New York. And anyway, this person, who was also a member of the current mafia, I don't know which branch it is, but he was pretty high up. He wanted to know about my father's name. And I said yes. My father's father was one of the 7 brothers who was leasing a garage in New York from the mafia. And I guess they were doing a little more than just leasing the garage. They were probably soldiers in the mafia. But in any event, that was my connection. And there are obviously other connections. I'm the lawyer for the world's gold. So this person, who was also locked up with me, said, I'm going to get you out. And sure enough, a couple of days after that, I was released. That's because the mafia, they're part of the coalition for the rule of law. It's a very large coalition, and this coalition includes the world's military powers. It includes actually all of the people on Earth, the ones that realize how deep the corruption is. And the governments are worthless. The governments are part of the banking cartel. They're just illegal. They're not working from the constitutions. They're part of a very large corporation, and this corporation includes It includes the Vatican. That's one of the very largest corporations. People can't get used to this fact, but it is a fact. And there are enough people who actually do understand that reality has turned on its head, and the governments are the ones that are illegal. And the people themselves we have to go back and reconstitute our governments. And the way we're going to do this is each and every country is going to do it its own way, and the people in each and every country are going to be working together. They're going to be working together through villages and towns, and they're not going to be using the fake paper money, because that's the root of all of this corruption. That's the way the bankers are managing to bamboozle everybody. And enough people have realized this, and I've been telling people this for years. I've been documenting this. One of the things that recently came to light was the financial statements. The Securities and Exchange Commission has financial statements of all of the wealth in the global debt facility. Now, these are going to have to be audited, and we're not going to take anybody's word for them. But there are records there, and we do have a starting place. And the way that we're going to be working together is we're not going to be relying on the banking cartel. I've been getting a lot of strange correspondence from people who they don't get it. They don't realize that the tables have turned. And when I say there's a critical mass, that means that enough of us realize what's going on, that they can't fool us anymore. We understand what's happening, and that's a very big change. You better believe that's an enormous change. And how are we working together? We have to go back and realize what mistakes we've been making, how we've been confused. There was a lot of commotion recently about Catherine Austin Fitts, who's what we call controlled opposition. Controlled opposition, that's somebody who tells you some things that are true and other things that are false. And the things that are false are so false that they confuse you so badly that you just, you never really recover. And Catherine Austin Fitz's point of departure from reality is she's telling us that there are off-world events. That's just to distract us. That's just to fool us so that we don't look at what's going on Earth. So she's a liar, and she's trying to confuse us with that important lie. There are other ways that people, when they're controlled opposition, where they try to confuse you. Today, there was somebody who was insisting that I tell him about how the bonds work. The bonds. You realize that there are bonds that were issued by the Federal Reserve in exchange for gold. This is how the Federal Reserve is bankrupt, because there's interest on the bonds, and the interest compounds. So by the time you add up what the Federal Reserve owes, it owes $2 quadrillion. So this person was insisting that he understand how the bonds are connected to the global debt facility, and he wants to cash them out. He thinks he's going to be become rich, and everybody else is going to sit there and let him be rich and on top of everybody else. That's not how it's working. We're all going to be working together. We're all going to be sorting it out together. We're all going to be treating each other as equals. And this person thinks that if he knows the inside trick to the bonds and how the bonds are cashed with Social Security, he thinks that he should become rich and everybody else should let him become rich while they themselves don't understand what's going on. No, it's not going to work that way. And he thinks because he understands that there's bonds, that gives him, that entitles him. There's something called entitlement. People like to think they're entitled. And the fact of the matter is that they're not entitled. People are all we're all in this together. And we're all going to recover together. And we're all going to have a brilliant future together. And we're now at critical mass. So there is no way that the financial corruption is going to continue. It's not. And let me explain one more time how the corruption works, so that you understand. Excuse me. So that you understand. Money, that's precious metals. That's gold. That's silver. That's gemstones. It can also be art. It can also be crops. But it's things, tangible things that are valuable. That's money. It's not paper. It's not bonds. That's not money. So what happens is the banking cartel says that it's issuing paper money, and that when it's got the right to issue the paper money, it can go out, the banking cartel can go out and buy valuable things for paper. For paper. That's the scam. It's very readily apparent to see how that works. You use paper to buy real things. Now, the central bankers think that they have the right to do this, and that's why it's happening. But they don't. We take that away from them. And when local villages are the ones that issue currency, they do that through something called a barter system. What that is that anybody that's making something, whether it's a service or whether they're growing crops, something that's valuable, that they themselves are working on, they use that as money. And in the village and town, they use the barter system to exchange those valuable things. And you can figure out, if you want to issue your own currency, you can figure out how you do that. The banking cartel can't manage to steal the world's wealth despite everything they've continued to try. The banking cartel's greed also teaches people about reality. This analogy is imperfect. There's nothing that will burn up in the global currency reset. We're going to transform our world to a kinder place and assume our transcendent aspects. The corruption will end as the world's paper money is exchanged for local currencies and for gold in the global currency reset.